My friends and I have always heard of the ghost stories of our school. It's always been the hush-hush stories being told by students who stay after school for activities. It's their way of getting a thrill in their otherwise mundane school days. They talk about the mysterious hand in the locker of room 4B, the girl who hung herself in the second-floor bathroom, the ghost that would appear to join your group as you walked across the school gymnasium at 10 at night. All these stories would pass from mouth to ear, from student to student, in the dusk hours in the school. Almost all of the stories had one thing in common. Every story had been experienced by at least a dozen people. These people confirmed the truth of the stories as to solidify the legends and myths. But there was one story that laid a mystery, and no one knows where it even came from. It is the story of the ghost with red eyes. One of my friends, Liam, heard of a story about a ghost with red eyes that wandered the halls of the school at night, looking for people to play with. When I first heard this story, it sent shivers down my spine. I hated it when ghosts wanted to play with people. I don't know. There's just something about that scared me more. However, all my friends were enraptured by the story, even more so when Liam said that the story didn't have an origin. No one knew where it came from, and no one has seen the ghost. You see, my group of friends has a peculiar hobby. Not only do we love talking about the ghost stories in the school like most, but we also sometimes like to prove some of the more dubious stories with actual proof. We'd do this by doing ghost hunting. We'd prepare for the night and get supplies ready for when we'd stay the night at school. We went to a private school, so we all had uniforms, which would make the fact that we didn't change our clothes from yesterday not that noticeable. Then we'd just stay hidden in one of the classrooms until the guards would lock up the school for the night. We had done it before, doing it mostly for the thrill of the adventure and the bonding we'd have as friends. We rarely found substantial evidence to prove that ghosts existed, but we'd experience some weird creaks and noises that we'd jump at, and just laugh about it afterwards. All in all, it was usually a fun time and not at all dangerous, but we've never tried going ghost hunting from a story this vague before. All the other stories have the ghosts do singular actions, like appearing in front of you, or giving you a tap on the shoulder, or even the occasional cold spot. But something about this gave me a wrong feeling. It might have been the unknown source, but I felt more scared of the word Liam used in the story. Play. The ghost wanted to play. I didn't want to be a scaredy cat of the group, so I still went along with it. I just imagined it would be the same as our old trips where we just felt a cold breeze and had a good laugh at who got scared first. So after a week of planning and gathering information about the story, we've narrowed down the areas where we could potentially find the ghost to 3 spots: the gymnasium, the 5th floor food hall, and the main stairway in the middle of the school. We planned to stay over the next Friday so that we could potentially sleep through the rest of the weekend classes we had, since they were usually just makeup classes. That night, we did the usual routine. We all stayed behind for club activities, but then started to slowly move into our hiding spots all over the school at around 6 to 7 p.m. We thought that it would be smart to hide separately, so that if one of us got caught, the guard would feel like he was the only one, and the rest of the group could continue on with the adventure. Luckily enough, none of us got caught, and we all emerged from our hiding spots once we heard the loud snap of the school gates being locked for the night. At that, our ghost hunting began. We all met up at the first location, the gymnasium. We remembered the last time we went there, and felt that gust of wind that we soon figured out was just a window that was left open the same night. This time, we walked the entirety of the gym and slowly tried to look for anything peculiar or out of the ordinary. It seemed normal, and nothing really moved or felt different, other than it was creepy as hell because of the darkness. We decided to move on to the next spot, the food hall. As we stepped into the hall, I could have sworn I saw a red light coming from the far end of the hall. I jumped back as I thought it was a ghost, but Liam went closer to find out it was just one of the emergency lights signaling that it was out of battery. Everyone had a good laugh at my episode, and we continued to explore. For the next few hours, There wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. Everything seemed normal, just dark, but we saved the best for last. Most of the sources Liam asked said that they saw the ghost along the main stairway of the school. We started at the ground floor, planning to go floor by floor to see if we can find something. We slowly crept up the stairs when I heard a laugh from behind me. It was pretty high-pitched, so I thought it might have been Becca. Her voice was pretty childlike, and the voice I heard was similar to a kid laughing. I didn't bother to ask her as it might freak her out. We moved from the third to the fourth until we reached the top. I saw Liam, who was leading the group, just stop at the top of the staircase. He wasn't moving. We asked him what was going on, but he didn't respond. We shone our lights to him and saw he was visibly shaken. A shiver went down all our spines. We slowly crept up to peek at what was at the top of the 6th floor, and saw it. It was a little boy, roughly about 6 to 7 years old, wearing our school's uniform. He just stood there, at the landing of the 6th floor staring at the ground. I pushed past Liam and went to the kid, thinking that he might have been stranded and locked. He might have been scared being all alone in the school at night. I tried to console him, and then a thought came to me. I asked Liam, the ghost that we are looking for, what were the descriptions? He started to talk. Male, child, red eyes. I snapped back to the kid to see him staring right at me with the blood-red eyes and a wicked smile on his face. I yelled and screamed and ran to my friends, but it was too late. He grabbed my leg and dragged me back down the stairs. I quickly held on to Liam's foot as he grabbed onto Becca. We all linked together like a human chain, all single-handedly being dragged down 6 flights of stairs all the way to the bottom. At the bottom of the stairs, I felt the grip on my leg release, and all of my friends and I just lay there bruised and scratched from the weight down. When I looked up, I saw the kid looking at us with a bloody red eyes and wicked smile as he said, "Let's play again soon," then disappeared into the night. Me and my friends never went ghost hunting, ever again. I am a famous food vlogger with over 6 million subscribers and followers on my social media. I travel to different places and show my viewers all kinds of food. I have a series in my channel where I travel to a different country and have my viewers guess which country the food that I would showcase is from. The first person to guess it correctly receives a prize package from me. These are my most popular videos, and I usually get a couple of sponsored trips from well-known companies all over the world. One day, a famous food company contacted me to talk about a brand deal. They owned several restaurants that a lot of famous people go to. They create unique, beautiful, and luxurious delicacies that cost hundreds of dollars for a single plate. We quickly finished our negotiations, and I was to fly a few weeks later. The moment I got off the plane, a manager was there to pick me up. It was a week-long trip where I could go behind the scenes and see how everything is prepared. On the first day, they had prepared a party at the hotel where the chosen influencers from all around the world have gathered. They served fancy clams, lobsters, steaks, and a lot more dishes topped and marinated with their special sauces. It was those sauces that built their empire, and lucky for us, we get to see how those sauces are made the very next day. It was a tightly packed schedule. We had to leave the hotel at 4 in the morning and drive all the way to the countryside to where their factory was. Before we entered, they had us sign a non-disclosure agreement to make sure we don't reveal their ingredients. We are only allowed to take pictures and videos on areas that they allow us to. After that, we were handed out a rectangular plate divided into 4 sections, and each holds one of their specialty sauces. We were given the opportunity to have as much as we wanted as we go around the tour. The first section of the factory that we went to is where they make their famous marinara sauce. The moment the doors open, you got a whiff of the sweet tomato flavor. They showed how the tomatoes are broken down or crushed in this huge container and poured into a massive mixing bowl. Then, the meat that were sliced and minced perfectly were poured into the mixture. Once they finished, they would put them in jars and label them, and then ship them out. The process was very simple, but the huge machines with the latest technology are what made the experience fascinating. We proceeded to go to other rooms, such as the sweet and sour room, hollandaise room, chimichurri room, and cheese fondue room. All the other rooms were so interesting, but I did notice a few odd things. In every room we go to, there would be workers who were tiptoeing around like some scared mouse. They also didn't have any ID badges, unlike the others. Another thing was that the grinding and mixing machine smelled like... I don't know, it was probably just the machine oils or something. Anyway, after the tour, we were immediately escorted out of the building, and we were about to head to the restaurant when I noticed that I had lost my phone. I asked for them to let me go back in, and they reluctantly agreed. As one of the staffs escorted me around the different rooms, I suddenly heard loud struggles coming from a nearby room. We walked past it, and from the corner of my eye, I saw a glimpse of a bloody woman being dragged as the doors closed. The staff quickly drew my attention away, as if none of that had ever happened. It troubled me the whole day. I couldn't enjoy the trip any longer. Whatever the staff said after, I found myself doubting all of them. Late that night, I went on my computer and tried to dig up information about the company. Normal searches did not bring up anything, so I tried the dark web. It was hard to find, but I had discovered a lot of unusual and disturbing things. There were accusations that they kidnapped people from the streets. There were also articles that said that they set up foundations for abandoned children and raise them until they are meaty enough. It was crazy. There were hundreds of reports and complaints, but they were all buried in the dark web. This company gave me the creeps, but I know then that I have to get to the bottom of this, for my love of food, or my moral compass. I just had to do it. So the next day, I told them that I came down with the flu and would not be able to join the rest of the trip. When the buses left, I secretly snuck out of the hotel and went to start my investigation. I've compiled the names and the addresses of the complaints and decided to pay them a visit. The addresses led me to secluded areas outside the city. 9 out of the 10 households that I visited lived in a shabby house with no clean water and electricity. They were so out of touch from the world that they were scared of my camera. I started asking them about the company, and they told me that once a year, people dressed in black would come to the village and take their children away. In return, the parents would be provided with 2 years' worth of food. By the time I was putting the puzzles together, it was already getting late. I had to head back to the hotel to not arouse suspicion. Even if a village with only about 80 families all have their children taken away, it wouldn't be nearly enough to provide for the company. That must mean that there are more. I knew doing this by myself would not be possible. I had to gather enough evidence before the trip ended in a couple of days. I knew it would be a risk, but I decided to message my fans who lived in this country to help me out. I asked them to help me interview other families in different villages and try to gather as much information and evidence while I would try and infiltrate the factory. The next day, I begged for them to bring me to the factory, saying that I was thinking of franchising. The money-hungry people that they were, they took the bait. Obviously, I invited the other influencers along so that I would have the chance to sneak out. After that drive, we finally reached the factory. Just like before, the staffs were with us the entire time, and I noticed that all the doors had security locks. To cause a distraction, I went close to one of the machines and tried frantically opening the locks. When they caught on, they rushed to me and tried pulling me back, but I kept my firm. I shouted at the top of my lungs, screaming, "There is a body! There is a body!" whilst pointing inside the machine. In reality, there wasn't one. Not from where I was standing anyway. But that caused enough panic in the room for the other staff to come running in. While all that happened, I was able to snatch an ID badge and snuck out. I took out my camera and went through different rooms to see if there were any evidences. In one of the rooms, I found mutilated bodies wrapped in garbage bags. It was a slaughter room. In the room next to it was a freezer room. Body parts wrapped in cling wrap stacked on top of each other, perfectly labeled, filled the room the size of a football field. But it gets worse. The rooms after were the carving rooms. Just like how meat are sold in the supermarket, these human meat are separated into different cuts. Some are then aged, while others go straight into marination and seasoning. If you had no idea what they were, you'd probably start licking your lips, wondering how tasty they are. The whole factory was room after room of pure evil. The worst of them all was the basement. Even from beyond the bolted door, you could hear the crying and screaming of the abducted people. I placed the ID badge into the scanner, and the huge metal door opened. I dropped my phone on the ground as horror filled my soul. There were hundreds, no, thousands of people in there. I came to help, but my body was frozen until somebody picked my phone up and handed it to me. It was one of the staff's. I was caught. I panicked and took the phone from his hand, and before I was even asked, I bolted out of there and rejoined the rest. The whole ride back to the hotel was tense. I knew that they figured it out, but they didn't say anything. It was so scary. Something was definitely up. I didn't know what though. When I got back to the hotel, I immediately gathered my materials and started working on this video. I have to get this out there. To my fans and viewers who are watching this, please make this known. Help me help them. And if you are watching this without my usual intro, then it means that this will be the last. I love you, and hopefully I'll see you next week. In the winter of 2002, there was an unusual rise in the number of pregnant women. It threw the whole town into a frenzy. Soon after, a witch hunt began. I've only read about them in books and saw them in movies. I never knew humans were actually capable of such horrific deeds. That Christmas was when their first hunt started. I remember looking out my window and seeing a mob of people going down the street and stopping at my neighbor's porch. They rang the doorbell a dozen times while banging at the door. When there was no answer, they surrounded her house and broke all the windows and smashed the back door, forcing themselves in. I dialed the cops as I kept watch. They were able to drag her out and pry her away before the cops could come. Curious little me secretly followed them all the way to the middle of the park, where they had a secret underground hideout. It still baffles me how a place like that still existed in the early 2000s. At the center of the huge dome, there laid a huge pile of logs. The smell of gasoline in the air. They tied her up and lit her on fire. I swear, as she was burning, I heard two voices screaming for help. I wasn't able to stomach the sight and puked on my way home. I stayed awake that night, fearing what the months to come had in store for us. My boyfriend, who had just become a police officer at that time, had decided to patrol the area where I lived every time he could. He would also accompany me to and from work as months passed. The gathering of this horrifying cult was all over the news. Dead bodies started piling up, and the town had fallen into complete chaos. According to the reports, the victims were all past their first trimester, which means their bellies were already showing to a certain point. In the beginning, they were all done secretly at night. However, they started getting bolder and braver, to the point where the attacks would be done in broad daylight. Burnt bodies would be found tied up in parks, forests, and even the telephone poles. Bodies with their stomachs cut open thrown over rivers and highways were also found with a letter in them. The letter said, "Those who carry the devil's spawn shall be punished. We have to rid of the world of evil, and only then will we be offered a pass to heaven." It wasn't that police officers weren't doing their jobs. No matter how many people they arrested, the crimes continued. Their following grew more and more, and some even believed that a certain number of victims themselves became a member and ended their own lives. It was then that I decided to avoid the outside world as much as possible. I took a leave from work, and I would only go out to buy necessities. One day, as I was leaving the supermarket, I noticed that I was being followed. I quickly called my boyfriend as I got into my car and drove home. I made sure to lock the doors and windows and turned off the lights. Unfortunately, my boyfriend was on his way to make an arrest and wouldn't be able to come home anytime soon. Fearing for my safety, I kept watch of the woman hiding behind the tree across the street. She had her phone in one hand and a hammer in the other. After about an hour of watching, she started to make phone calls like crazy, and in the following minutes, suspicious people started crowding the street. I knew then that I had to get out. I secretly went out the back door. I quietly jumped over my neighbor's fence and escaped through there. I was a block away from the police station when I saw my boyfriend in the distance. Before I could call out to him, a police officer went up to me and offered to escort me inside. I happily agreed, and as we walked a few steps, I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital room with my mouth gagged and my limbs tied to the bed. A nurse came up to me and injected something into my body. In about a few minutes, I dozed off. When I woke up next, I was being pushed into the emergency room. The hallway was dark and hollow. The nurse looked weird and suspicious, and they already had bloodstains all over their shirts. The operating room smelled rotten. There were stains all over the walls, and the surgeon inside was holding a dead body and threw him in the garbage. I remember being scared for my life more than ever. I tried breaking off the cuffs and bringing my legs to my stomach to protect him. I went ballistic and kicked all of those who came near my belly. I was able to break the cuffs off and quickly sat up and took a scalpel from one of the nurses and fought back. It was 3 against 1, and honestly, they weren't as strong and aggressive as I thought they would be. It felt like they were forced to do this, so I tried to persuade them to let me go. As I was getting through to them, I heard a ruckus outside, and then I blacked out once again. This time, I woke up in the secret hideout by the park. It wasn't only me who was held hostage. There were 2 other women besides me. We were surrounded by people who wore masks and held knives and torches. These people dragged the woman on my left a few meters away from us. She cried and screamed for help as they turned her belly into a punching bag. She started bleeding heavily, and I found myself wrapping my arms around my body. They then carried the second woman on the opposite direction and tied her to a pole. They poured gasoline all over her, and in a flash, she was engulfed in flames. I couldn't bear the scene in front of me, and I puked my guts out. At that time, they picked me up and tied me to a chair. They pushed about a dozen pills down my throat. They all gathered around and watched with excitement. I felt my vision getting blurry and my heart racing. My stomach began to hurt as if I was being pulled apart from the inside. Blood started to flow down my legs, and I was in incredible pain. They all laughed and cheered, shouting, "Kill the spawn! Kill the spawn!" I couldn't bear it anymore. I wanted to break free of that chair and strangle them. I wanted to rip their throats out and crush them with my bare hands. Then all of a sudden, I heard a gunshot from afar. 1, 2, then multiple fires. I see men running towards us. My boyfriend with other officers started firing their guns in the air. There was chaos, but I felt relieved and I passed out for the last time. I woke up in a hospital bed feeling warm and safe. Unlike the one before, the hospital room is clean and bright. Beside me was my boyfriend who had saved me. It was all good for a moment, until I touched my stomach and there was a huge scar running down from my belly button. I paused and cried. Even months after that incident, I can still recount them as if it were just yesterday. Sometimes my baby is here, and sometimes she's not. It all started a couple of years ago. In the middle of the road, I suddenly fainted and was almost hit by a car. I was rushed to the hospital and got stitches on my head. When I woke up, I was introduced to the doctor who saved me. He was tall and handsome, totally my type. It was love at first sight. After I was discharged, I kept going to the hospital bringing him food and letters. Although it was against the rules, he would secretly accept them. I fell in love even more. I mustered up my courage and asked him for his phone number. I told him that I really liked him and wondered if we could go out. Sadly, he rejected me. The age difference was a bit of a problem, and because he works in the emergency room, he wouldn't have time for me. He said that it would be unfair and cruel. That made my heart skip a beat even more. In the following days, I got into accidents and I had to meet him. The heavens must have given me these chances to be with him. Still, he kept pushing me away and I had no choice. I decided to devote my future into becoming a nurse. It was the easier path out of the two. Although it did take a few years, I was unable to finally start my residency in the same hospital. I do not think he remembered me, but that's okay. I was not giving up. I tried assisting him in all of his patients. I gave him coffee whenever he was tired, and I encouraged him whenever he was down. Thus, I was nicknamed the Young Mistress. Apparently he was married recently. They have been together for years before marriage, and she was pregnant. She's pregnant with his child, and they're living happily. But what about me? What about my happily ever after? I've dedicated years of my life and she just comes and swoops in. She's tainted him. I believe that she was the devil, and he just fell into her seductive charms. So I went up and asked him, "Is it me or your wife?" He got flustered. He accused me of being crazy and obsessed. He told me that even if he chose me, he couldn't leave his wife because of their child. That was it. It was a kid. It was the solution to my problem. But how do I go about this? I cannot just randomly go up to her. It would look suspicious. I had to wait. Wait until she came for a checkup. I walked up to her and introduced myself with a different name, of course. I befriended her. It wasn't hard, just a little chat, and the lonely housewife opened up. It wasn't long until I was visiting her in their house and having some girls' time. I made sure she didn't mention me to her husband, saying that it would be awkward at work. She bought it. Every time I visited her, I made sure to drop in a little bit of poison in her drink. And what do you think that did to her body? Especially her baby. After the deed was done, I went up to him with high expectations and asked, "Now, is it still your wife?" The vexed expression he had said it all. He was done. Since then, he never looked at me anymore. What did I do wrong? I don't get it. I didn't give up. I decided to switch tactics. I tried buttering up to him by giving him his favorite drink and chocolate every day. I also bought some baby clothes for his future baby. Wasn't that nice? Anyway, he still kept ignoring me, but my pain didn't last long. 'Cause just a few days after, we had a new surgeon join the hospital. He was tall and young and handsome like a prince. He was very skilled and everybody loved him. He was an orthopedic surgeon. He was so cool. That very day, I decided to become his assistant nurse so that we'd always be together. I made sure to stay by him and flirt with him as much as possible. Again, it took years of hard work, but I became his department's head nurse. Fortunately, unlike the last one, he didn't have a wife or girlfriend. However, I was faced with new enemies. His patients. They'd be goggling all over him, wearing seductive clothing while making him touch their bodies. It was disgusting. I had to get rid of them. And so, I did what I do best. I befriended them. I made sure that they would request for me to care for them all the time. I couldn't do anything during operations, but when they sleep at night, I injected some anesthesia into them, then break their bones bit by bit. I'd also tear out a few muscles here and there and cut ligaments as well. The years I spent studying has paid off. I also made sure to time them perfectly. I would only do them when he has long hours of surgeries lined up or have seminars to attend to. It went pretty well. Soon after, I became his girlfriend. It was awesome at first. I became the famous nurse who stole the heart of the #1 doctor. Of course, that did not last long. When I was assigned to a VIP patient, I immediately fell in love. He was the best a woman like me could ask for. I put on my best makeup every day. I placed my hair neatly into a bun. I also unbuttoned the top of my shirt and had my flirt game on whenever I entered the room. We wrote secret letters to each other and had a few moments which made him completely fall for my charms. My nickname was then changed to Gold Digger, but who cares? The moment my soon-to-be husband got discharged, I quit my job and became the beautiful wife of a rich CEO. With the money and power that I now have, I was able to charm guys that were out of my league before. It was all good and happy, but I was getting older. My face was getting wrinkly and my body all saggy. I tried getting operations all over, but it just did not help. People left me for younger ones, so I had no choice. Have you heard of the Blood Countess? She believed that by drinking the blood of young ladies, she'll gain eternal youth. That sounded like a smart idea to me. That's why I had an underground chamber built and gathered and adopted disgustingly young ladies. To start with, I killed once a week. I had to do some test trials, didn't I? I made some of them strip, pluck out all their nails, branded them with iron, which was not ideal by the way, their skin tasted burnt. I cut their throats, opened them up, dismembered their bodies, which was surprisingly messy. I think that I wasn't able to do them cleanly because I did not train to be a surgeon. That was my only regret. The blood would splatter all over the floor and walls, and it was such a waste. Also, I had to think of the tools. Some caused too much damage to their bodies that the inside were all mixed together. It was hard to separate them. Some, on the other hand, were too dull that they were not efficient and caused way too much pain that they would not stop screaming. It took quite some time, but I finally settled on a way. To prevent any annoying noise, I would make them drink tea laced with sleeping pills. I would then tie them upside down right above my large tub, then with a huge butcher knife, swing 3 times across their necks, cleanly slicing their heads off. Blood would gush out and fill the tub. To be honest, the blood was warm and nice to the touch. It was so nice that I increased the times I did it per week. I was caught up in the fun that I briefly forgot about my original motive. I think I found a new side of me, a new hobby. With every blood I drank and bathed in, I felt younger and prettier. I gained the confidence of a 20-year-old luring men into my life. All throughout the years, I've killed hundreds of ladies and also hanged out with about the same number of guys. But also, all good things must come to an end. At the age of 73, I was caught and sentenced to death. And now, here I stand before you, ready to take my last breath. Last words? I think I've already said plenty. It was fun. As I walked to the bus stop late at night, I saw a woman standing alone a few meters away. Her hair was unkempt and loosely tied into a bun. Her dress was ragged and had holes in a few places, and she wasn't wearing any shoes either. The bus soon came and I hopped in, but she just stood there, staring. Then on another night, she was there again. This time, however, she had a luxurious pair of stilettos and rode the bus. She sat at the very back while I stayed close to the driver. After about 15 minutes, a younger lady got off the bus and she followed right behind. When she walked past me, I thought I saw her smiling. It gave me the creeps and couldn't shake the weird feeling. Around the same time on a different night, I saw her once again. In addition to the stilettos, she now had a long white dress, which in a normal circumstance would exude class and elegance, but to me she looked like a ghost. We both again rode the bus, and she again got off after another passenger. Every few weeks or so, I would see her, and she would always have something new to her, a bag, jewelry, and even her hairstyle. We have never interacted before, but that night she had her nails done. She sat beside me on the bus. Although her face looked pale and dirty, with her new getup she seemed more approachable. I thought that it was rude of me to think that she was creepy last time, so I tried to start up a conversation. "Hello. We seem to bump into each other a lot at night. Your nails look lovely. Where'd you get them?" She continued to stare ahead and ignore me. I felt creeped out once again and just kept to myself after. The bus was pretty empty. She could have sat anywhere else, yet she didn't. I thought she wanted to be friends, but I guess I was wrong. The ride to my stop was awkward and uncomfortable, and the weirdest part was that she pushed the stop button before I was able to. She faced me and smiled. "You get off at the next stop, right?" I was shocked, but just ended up nodding my head. She got up and let me pass, and I quickly exited. Fearing that she would follow me, I took long strides as soon as I got off. Click, clack, click, clack. Without looking back, I stopped, and the footsteps stopped. I strode faster. Click, clack, click, clack. I turned around and there was nobody there. I started to get scared, and fearing for the worst, I ran home. While running, my bag got caught in a tree, but I continued on. I locked the gate and went to my room and peeked out the window. She wasn't there, but I was too scared to go back to get my stuff, so I decided to wait till morning. It was around 7 a.m., and I went to go grab my bag. It was left on the ground, all wrecked, with my things scattered everywhere. I checked if anything was missing, and nothing. My items were damaged, but not even my credit card and cash were stolen. I did find my lipstick all crushed up though, which was very weird. So that day, I decided to stop by the police station to file a complaint. I told the detective about the creepy woman who followed me home. However, since I was unharmed, they told me that nothing will be done. I wasn't planning on sitting idly to get killed, so I took matters into my own hands. I bought a small spy cam and placed it perfectly hidden in my bag. I made sure that it was recording, and I went to the exact bus stop again. For the next few weeks, she didn't show up. I was both worried and relieved at the same time, but it was too good to be true. On the night of the 13th, she was there, waiting. I pressed record and stood behind her. She ignored me as if we've never met before. That's fine. It's better that way, I thought to myself. We got on the bus and I sat a few rows behind her. She was still as always, never moved an inch, never uttered a word, never made eye contact with anybody. After a few stops, she got off and I followed. I was following her, following a lady. It was a bit of a walk, about 30 minutes. The path was narrow with dim and broken lights. Then she walked past her and turned at the corner ahead. For a second, I thought I was being paranoid, but things went down in a flash. As the lady in front walked by the corner, a hand shoots out and grabs her by the hair. She dragged her all the way to an abandoned warehouse while covering her mouth with the other hand. The lady was in pain. I see it. I know it. But I can't. I won't help. I needed evidence. I had to have her sacrifice herself, so I watched patiently. I took a peek from a broken window. She pushed her to the ground so hard that I heard her skull crack open. Blood slowly seeped out from her head and painted the floor bright red. She used her monstrous strength to crack her head open even more and started gobbling. That monster took her limbs apart like she was some plaything. It was viciously devouring the body on the ground and then stopped. It looked towards my direction while breathing heavily. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I held my breath for 8 seconds I held my breath for 8 seconds and it continued on. My body dashed out of there as quickly as I could. I called the cops and showed them the video. A manhunt began, and within 24 hours, she was locked up in jail. I was called in to ID her, and this time she had her makeup done. She looked different from the monster last night, yet felt the same. She demanded to speak to me. She said that she would only confess in front of me. The investigators tried everything they could, but she wouldn't budge. So after a long deliberation, I was sent in. The moment I entered the room, she was smiling wickedly. I sat across the table and asked, "Why?" The lights in the room flickered, the table shook and our eyes met. "I was once like you, a bland, ordinary girl with nothing but a simple wish. One day, I met a crazy old lady. She was in the middle of being arrested after trying to murder me. The police officers were surrounding us, her with her hands in the air and me laying on the ground with my neck cut open, shivering and cold. She laughed and put her hands down. She came close to me and whispered in my ear. 'What is it you desire?' she asked. Even the then dying me didn't answer life. Instead, I said, 'Beauty.' Before I knew it, I was alive and well. I was given another shot at life, but that wasn't everything. I was hungry for wishes. You see, every time I killed, a wish of mine would be granted. I just had to keep doing it to get anything I want. You could say that it's a contract with Satan. So, what is it you desire?" The whole room was in chaos. Mirrors breaking, ceiling falling down, the table and chairs flying. I felt my soul wrenched out of my body and an entity take its place. I was out of my mind. I fell unconscious to the floor, and when I snapped out of it, she was laying dead with officers around her. I got up as if nothing had ever happened. I walked out of the station a different person. I saw the world differently. Everywhere I go, I did not see people as humans anymore. Rather, I saw them as different colored papers with a lot of zeros written on them.